All right, welcome back. Today, we're opening up the black box of corporate sustainability. We hear a ton of buzzwords constantly: eco-friendly, net zero green initiatives. But how do companies actually handle these issues behind closed doors? Well, in this explainer, we're looking at a totally fascinating piece of research from the Journal of Management Control. It takes us straight to the factory floors of Sri Lanka to demystify all of this. We're going to look right past those glossy marketing brochures and figure out the actual internal wiring of these organizations.
So here's the multi-million-dollar question we have to ask ourselves. When a company claims to be green, is that a deeply embedded core strategy that actually guides their daily operations? Or is it really just a public relations illusion designed to keep regulators and activists off their backs? To truly get to the bottom of this, we have to pop the hood and look at the actual systems managers use to control their organizations.
And to ground this in a really gritty, high-stakes reality, listen to this quote from a deputy general manager in the study. He literally admitted, "Some companies dump their industrial waste to the sea. Who is there to check? Just give an alcohol bottle or 500 rupees to the officers and they can do anything." I mean, wow. That is the very real situation in many developing nations, where regulatory systems can be incredibly inefficient or even corrupt. When external pressure is that weak, a company's internal approach to sustainability is entirely up to them. They can cheat or they can choose to lead. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Two Systems, One Business, inside the corporate brain. To make sense of this, let's use a metaphor. Imagine a company as a living, breathing entity with a brain that's divided into two very different and sometimes completely conflicting halves. On one side, you've got the regular management control systems, or MCS. Think of this as the survival and profit brain. It controls the core operations, the financial targets, the overall strategy. On the exact opposite side, you have the sustainability control systems, or SCS. Now, this is the company's conscience, and it's responsible for managing environmental and social impacts. Here's the catch. For true corporate sustainability to actually exist, this profit brain and this conscience absolutely cannot operate in isolation. They have to actively talk to each other. And that ongoing communication, that is what researchers call integration. It's the ultimate goal here. Academics describe integration as a thick socio-technical process, which basically just means it's a deeply woven network where a company's financial ambitions and social responsibilities overlap perfectly. The technical systems link up, the organizational structure forces operational and sustainability teams into the same room, and cognitively, the mindset of the entire company shifts to see sustainability as a core business function, not an afterthought. Which brings us to Section 2, the 4 strategic configurations, an evolutionary maturity model. Because let's be real, not every company achieves that kind of integration right out of the gate. In fact, the researchers identified 4 distinct types of corporate setups. You can think of this model as basically a journey of corporate maturity. Now, take a look at this matrix because it beautifully maps out our entire journey. The horizontal axis measures how integrated that profit brain and that conscience are, sliding from weak to strong. Meanwhile, the vertical axis measures how complex these control systems are. Are they super simple, centralized, top-down? Or are they complex, decentralized, and highly interactive? Exactly where a company lands on this map completely dictates how they treat the planet and their people. Essentially, companies evolve through a spectrum here. First, they start out entirely reactive, doing the absolute bare minimum just to survive and not get fined. Then, they might slowly become accommodative, trying to find some kind of middle ground to keep stakeholders happy. And finally, the most evolved companies become truly proactive pioneers. They're the ones setting the industry standards and actually driving innovation through sustainability. Let's start at the bottom with Section 3, Faking It, Reactive Compliance. This is the lowest stage of the maturity model. We're talking about the companies that basically view sustainability as nothing more than a really annoying cost of doing business. The researchers label this stage symbolic compliance control. Here, the corporate conscience is almost totally decoupled from the profit brain. Integration is incredibly weak, and the controls are super basic. These companies have a highly passive attitude. They literally only lift a finger when external pressure from regulators forces them to. And whatever environmental goals they do have are completely disconnected from their actual long-term strategic plans. To anchor this in reality, let's look at Company D from the study. They manufacture electronic components, and because they make intermediary goods, meaning they don't sell directly to everyday consumers like you and me, they just don't face any consumer pressure. One of their managers straight up admitted that sustainability is just a passive system requirement handed down from corporate. It's a classic box-ticking exercise entirely isolated from how they actually run the business.
Moving right along to Section 4, Finding Middle Ground, the Accommodative Approach. Let's step up the ladder a bit. This is where companies actually try to balance planet and profit, but they run into some really distinct structural and mental hurdles along the way.
First up, in this middle ground, we find dynamic adaptive control. These companies are fascinating because they actually have highly complex, decentralized systems, but their sustainability integration is surprisingly weak. Why? Well, because their conscience is entirely focused on health, safety, and cost efficiency. They are completely blocked by what researchers call the win-win cognitive barrier. This is a huge point. It means if a green initiative doesn't instantly boost profits or solve an immediate safety risk, they just flat out won't do it.
Real-world examples make this super clear. Let's look at Company B, a tire manufacturer, and Company C, a paint manufacturer. Both aggressively manage things like explosion risks and rubber waste. Why? Because those issues directly impact their bottom line and keep their workers alive. But the researchers found that if a green initiative actually costs money without delivering an immediate financial return, the environment loses, basically every single time.
But then we have the other side of this middle ground, which brilliantly illustrates a completely different path: lean accommodative control. Here, we see the exact opposite scenario. The company has very simple, highly centralized systems, yet somehow they've managed to achieve really strong sustainability integration. So, how on earth does a simple system build a strong corporate conscience? Well, it all comes down to the boss.
Check out Company E, an electrical lighting manufacturer. They dropped a massive 35 million rupees on a CFL bulb recycling plant. Now, there was no intense regulatory pressure forcing their hand here. Instead, this entire project was driven by the managing director's personal vision for the environment. It absolutely proves that highly centralized, visionary leadership can literally force the corporate brain to adopt a conscience, even if the underlying systems are super simple.
And finally, Section 5, the gold standard, proactive integration. This is it. We are at the climax of the maturity model. We're looking at the absolute pinnacle of corporate sustainability, where the profit brain and the conscience are completely unified.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that in sustainability-driven comprehensive control, you have incredibly strong integration, paired with highly complex interactive control systems. These companies do not see sustainability as a compliance cost. No, they see it as a massive core business opportunity. They bake environmental KPIs into the daily goals of all their staff, from the operations floor to the finance department, not just delegating it to the safety teams. The undisputed hero of this research is Company A, a textile washing firm. They explicitly linked their entire corporate strategy directly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They deliberately want to set the norm for the whole industry. As they proudly noted, their competitors literally come visit their facilities just to see how they operate, because their targets are set so high. Case in point, when they needed a new boiler, their engineers actually fought the board to install a clean biomass boiler instead of relying on cheap furnace oil. They voluntarily push way beyond regulations to set the industry benchmark, serving as the ultimate model for a fully integrated corporate brain. So this brings us right back to where we started, but now we've got a crystal clear roadmap of how the internal corporate machinery actually works. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Look closely at your own company or even the companies you invest in and buy from every day. Are their sustainability goals deeply embedded into the very KPIs and strategic plans of every single employee? Or are they just a symbolic illusion printed on a glossy PR brochure? Understanding this framework helps you spot the difference instantly. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.